Hello, my name is Thomas. Welcome to this episode of British Culture Albion Never Dies, in which British Bond addict, as he's known on Instagram, Chris Hunt, talks me through his top and bottom James Bond films. We first got to know each other through Instagram, both of us sharing about our love of James Bond. We interacted, we started to message each other more, actually had some video chats. He has appeared on this podcast 6 times before. This is the 007th appearance, so I thought a good time to talk about Bond. And we have met up in real life, in case you're wondering, that one of our episodes was recorded live as we potted about London. As you may have seen on our Instagrams, we've met at Hammersmith Bridge and some of the central London locations. So it's really good to have him here to talk about his love of the James Bond films, the best and controversially the worst. And I'll say now, this is the first part of 2. He will be joining me next week to talk about the most controversial choices. I hope you enjoy this podcast.
Okay. Coffee at the ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, Chris, thank you very much for joining me a 007th time.
Oh, it's a special appearance, 007th appearance on the podcast. I must say, this is the only podcast I've appeared on 007 times, and this seems to be the perfect one.
I am very happy to be monopolising you like this.
Please continue.
And I thought, as it's the 007th time, we might as well dive straight into the world of James Bond.
Yes, yeah, about time.
Everyone loves a good ranking. Everyone likes to get angry about a ranking if it's not theirs.
I can't wait to irritate the entire audience with my list.
Same. Can I ask, okay, straight up, your top 3 James Bond films?
My top 3. Okay.
Yeah.
And this is in order. I'll go in reverse order from 3 to 1.
Okay.
So number 3 is GoldenEye.
Oh, okay.
I must say there's a bit of nostalgia based on this one, especially in comparison to the video game. And of course, Pierce Brosnan, I always see as my Bond in a way. But it's one I watched on VHS almost the most as a kid. My number 1 may be the one I watched the most, potential spoilers. But GoldenEye, I feel like it's one of those films that gets better with age. The casting is fantastic. Sean Bean is a villain I'm all about. I just have a blast every time I watch this film.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so GoldenEye. That is a popular favourite. I do find it interesting people do tie it in with the video game quite a lot.
Yeah, well, one of my earliest memories of Bond is actually playing the video game. Like the films were always about, but I got the console very early on in my life, and I think it was putting what I'd seen on the screen to a multi-sensory format really resonated with me.
Oh, that's really interesting. I'll say straight up, I know that mine is a lot lower for GoldenEye, but also I've no particular connection to the original video game. In fact, I love GoldenEye Reloaded. The one with Daniel Craig.
That is also a superb game. I love that game.
Absolutely. Okay, so that was your third. Number 2?
Oh, do you want to do a back and forth, or should I go from my 3?
Sure. Yeah, and I realized that when I was I don't really have a ranking except a magazine asked me to, and I did a massive cop-out, which is I did my top for every Bond, and then I did the ranking.
I see. That's an interesting way of doing it. Lazenby's is, well, he's only got 1.
Exactly. So if I go with my Pierce Brosnan to match, then my favourite Brosnan is definitely Tomorrow Never Dies.
Oh, fantastic.
Which may tie into the name of my Instagram account, Fleming Never Dies, and indeed this podcast, Albion Never Dies. It kind of, it's on a theme.
But doesn't make your top 3.
It's my top 1 for Brosnan. It probably does make my top 3, but it's my favourite Brosnan for sure.
Very fascinating. In that case, shall I go on to my number 2?
Please do, yeah.
My number 2, which was my number 1 for a very long time, about 11 years until I recently had a rejig, Skyfall.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I've talked about this with many people. There was something about it being in Britain at that time, right after the Olympics. So much of it resonated with me. And the fact it's such a British film and the period of my life I was in, just before university, all of this stuff happening, the London Olympics going incredibly successfully, and just it being a good film. Like Daniel Craig's films have dropped significantly for me over the years. This is the only one that's remained steadfast. I think it's because it's kind of its own story. There's not very many links to the whole Vesper arc. There's not many sort of back and forth bits here and there. It's just a standard Bond adventure. And obviously you throw in the fact M dies at the end. Spoiler. M dies at the end. And lots of people told me that's a very sad ending for a Bond film. But I think the introduction of the new M and the readiness for the next mission, I love that bit so much more. It's the 50th anniversary film, of course, and I left. It's weird. I watched that film with my dad for the first time. We went to the cinema like 7 times or something to watch it.
Oh wow!
Leaving that cinema for the first time, I'll never forget walking out with my dad in absolute silence until we got to the car because we were just processing it. And if you know me, or if you know my dad, we talk a lot.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, it's a very impactful film, and there we totally match. By the way, that's my favorite Craig by a long way. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know Casino Royale hits for a lot of people, and it never hit with me. I never caught that wave.
I'm the same. I really enjoyed it when it first came out, but looking at my list now, Casino Royale is 15th.
Yeah.
Which I don't think is a fair representation. In fairness, something everyone says, of my list of 25, the top 23 are all films I enjoy. Like, I thoroughly enjoy them. And to be fair, the 2 that aren't in the top 25, I still quite enjoy too.
Yeah.
So to say objectively Casino Royale 15th sounds really harsh for how good of a film it is. But of course, this is objective. Please remember, audience. And also, that's still quite high in a fantastic group of films.
Yes. The comments have been made. It's like pizza. A bad pizza is still pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I totally agree with you on that's the best Craig. And can I ask your number 1?
Well, you've actually mentioned it already. This one was one it's been around in my mind for a little bit. It's by far my most watched. And I realize it's just the film I enjoyed the most watching. I don't think it's the best crafted film. I don't think it's the best film in the Bond franchise. It's just my favorite, and it's Tomorrow Never Dies.
Oh, wow.
I really, really love that film. Every time I watch it, I have a great time. I can understand why people aren't particularly keen on it in some cases. And I must say, as much of some bits have aged rather unspectacularly, the remote control BMW, for want of a better phrase, the story itself gets so much better with age. And this kind of period of media we're in, it was kind of ahead of its time in a really strange way. I fully understand why some people have this film very low. But for me, for just pure enjoyment factor, and it is just the film I'm most likely to throw on. If it's a Sunday, it's raining, I want to watch a Bond film, more often than not, it's Tomorrow Never Dies. And I remember as a kid, my dad coming back home with that VHS and just watching it constantly. Every morning before school, I'd get up half an hour before my parents could so I could sneakily watch bits of it because they wouldn't have been too happy otherwise. And I just thoroughly enjoy this film. It's definitely one that's tainted by rose-tinted spectacles. But in fairness, sometimes when it comes to favourites, that's a benefit.
Absolutely. And I totally agree with you on this. I think this is one that for me just stands out almost from the whole series. It's just good fun.
I often like when people mention, because something I've realized with joining the Instagram account, which I did 3 years ago, by the way, good lord, over 3 years ago. Something that's interesting, this always pops up quite a bit on the sartorial references, and they often say this is a Pierce Brosnan's best looking Bond film, akin to Daniel Craig and Quantum of Solace, for example. I just enjoy any mention of this film.
Okay.
To be honest. And
I think it's one of my favorite villains.
Oh, and that thing played so brilliantly by John Price as well. Just I something I quote on a day. There's 2 quotes I have almost daily with my kids at school. I'm a teacher. I don't I don't have 42 children. At my school, I often start with the "Hello, my golden retrievers." Also, if they do something particularly good, I cannot help but just say "delicious."
He is good. I've just been reading the novelization, actually, which is something I've read before.
Yeah, it's really good. I was in a conversation with Raymond Benson recently, obviously the guy who wrote it, for those who aren't aware. And I asked about the inspiration for kind of like Wei Lin's backstory in that novelization. And basically his short was she is a really awesome badass character, but we don't see enough of that in the film. So he tried to shove it all into the novelization instead. I thoroughly enjoyed the novel. I've only read it once, but I did thoroughly enjoy the novelization.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, we seem very much aligned with our top three.
Interesting.
I'm very much liking that.
I say generation and location of origin, maybe a part of
Yes,
that.
because I've also noticed with Skyfall, it has the bittersweet ending, and that's something that Brits tend towards and Americans very much shy away from.
Yes, that's something I've really come to terms with recently. I was having a conversation with a very good friend of mine about our favorite TV show endings, and all of the ones I brought up, Life on Mars, Blackadder, all had this bittersweet ending. And the American I was talking to, they all had very positive endings. Even Mad Men, which is quite a depressing series in itself, it still has an uplifting style of ending. So that's a very good observation.
Mm, mm. So I listen to Joe Darlington a lot, being James Bond, and he talks about how, the first one is normally, yeah, we can all agree on that. Second one, okay. Third, it might start to get a bit strange. And then you go to that kind of fourth and fifth, and it tends to be where you get the deviations.
Yes.
So may I ask you about your fourth and fifth?
Well, it's interesting because my sixth is, I feel like, where I start to deviate. My fourth and fifth,
okay.
I'd say my fourth and fifth, I'm pretty sure on. There was one that was in my top five, which was Doctor No for the longest time, but that's dropped down to, and this is on a recent ranking, it's dropped down to 11th. I love Doctor No. I think it's a great film, but it really fell behind some of these. My number six, which might be the most controversial take I'm going to have of this entire podcast, is Goldfinger, and that's on thin ice.
Okay. If we go with my idea of the six of the best from all the actors, then yeah, that puts it on seventh for me. I'm not sure if that's quite true where I rank it, but I have all my favorites for the Bonds, and then Goldfinger, I suppose, would be kind of next for that.
What's your number one Connery then?
Oh, From Russia with Love.
Oh, okay, yeah, I completely understand that.
Yeah, I find it a lot more serious. I find him a more human character. I feel Goldfinger is where you start to have kind of a superhuman Bond.
Yes. It's Goldfinger. I don't have anything negative to say about it. The films above it are just films I enjoy the certain aspects of it more. And for those of you in the audience who are listening to this and have struggled with being like, oh, I have to put this here because everyone loves this film, it's okay to be slightly different.
Oh, absolutely. And my attitude towards it is, there's a whole generation who's like, but I remember when it came out in the cinemas, and I'm like, yeah, but I'm the generation where I don't. And I remember, watching it as a teen and finding some of it quite awkward and dated.
Yes, it's one film that's continuing to age badly, but thankfully it's only a few certain moments as opposed to the entire film in general.
Oh, definitely. And to be honest, there's certain resonances with Tomorrow Never Dies as well, which
Oh, absolutely.
You might almost see that film as kind of a lap of glory for James Bond. It is kind of all the best bits.
The one thing I found about Goldfinger is that I always appreciate watching a film where you can find where cliches started.
Oh, yeah.
This is one of them. This is where that whole, obviously Bond Mania really kicked off with Thunderball. But with Goldfinger, you really see it being laid down, especially with even the title sequence with Shirley Bassey. Even from there, that's the one they always parody. And I can really appreciate watching this film going, hey, this was such a mold breaking film.
Yeah.
Everyone tried to copy it.
Oh, absolutely. And it's it's why sometimes I look at Doctor No as a slightly funny film. It's probably my least watched Bond out of all of them. Just because they haven't really invented Bond yet.
No, I mean, that's the thing. And the one that gets me with Doctor No is the soundtrack. I really like Doctor No, but the soundtrack is 1950s kind of B-movie style in so many different ways, especially when they flip over the folder and it says Doctor No, and you just get trumpets for no real reason apart from emphasis.
It's very of the time.
Yes, and in some ways it works, especially when you get meeting Strangways and the club, and flashing back to London saying, "Oh, they've not picked up yet, sir." That's quite nice to see, but also, as much as it's a good thing, it sometimes hinders it too. From my personal experience, for many people, that will be a draw to the film.
Yeah, and it certainly stands as kind of a unique Bond film.
Yes, absolutely. I still have no idea why they picked that one to be the first Bond film.
Yeah, I guess you could say, oh, it's just one location, but then I thought about that. Yeah, most of the books are just one location.
Yeah, that's things. I remember when, is as you say, one location they could go to Barbados to a travelogue aspect,
Mm.
but there's so many other books that have exactly the same scenario.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is one film where I wouldn't mind seeing it remade and just add in the CGI giant octopus.
Yes, absolutely. Have him clinging for life against the squid. That and him
Exactly.
smashing tarantulas in the pipe.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you really get into Fleming in the original novel. You get into Fleming's love for really gruesome tortures.
Yeah, and I quite like this aspect of cat. I'd rather we saw more of the Doctor Knows, like trying to figure out the extent of the human body. But
Yeah.
hey, what we had was still very good and
Oh,
kicked off the
yes.
franchise we love so dearly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So those were your one, two, three, four, five, six.
So
Uh,
that was my 1, 2, 3, 6. The
oh,
4 and 5 I'm pretty set in my ways at this point.
okay. Okay.
So 5 for me is License to Kill.
Oh,
And depending on the generation of Bond fans I've talked to, I've had some very different, back and
yeah.
forth. For people who lived through the Miami Vice era, this seemed like a cop out. For someone who never saw Miami Vice and saw this as the first time of an 80s pastel drug movie, blew my mind.
Mm.
And I still have that. I've seen Miami Vice since. I've seen the 80s drug TV shows, films, books, novels. I've seen all of that since. But this was my first exposure. And from that alone, it is a damn good film. And I
Yeah.
really enjoyed the villain Dalton's representation of Bond in this, the stakes of character, the revenge aspect before he had almost every other film being a revenge. I love License to Kill a lot, and I will stand on a hill and defend it until the bitter end. Again, if you were alive in the 80s and had to live through Miami Vice and this came like 5 years late, I
Mm.
fully understand. But from my perspective, this is a superb Bond film.
Oh, absolutely. And it's my favorite, Dalton. So it ends up
Yeah.
being in my top six for sure. I think it's his best performance. And yeah, I'm a big fan of this film. I think when I was first reading the books, this would have been my number one Bond film overall, hands down.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also having watched all the behind the scenes documentaries of Dalton. This was the Bond he wanted to be, and there's a bit of
Yeah.
satisfaction from that because he really wanted Bond. I'm not going to say his accent because he's a bastard differently than I do, but he wanted to be a cold bastard.
Mm. Derbyshire accent comes out quite strongly. She's referred to as the Welsh Bond, but he was there for, I think, for a few months and actually went to school in Derby.
This
So
this smile for the birdie bastard.
yes.
Which is interesting because I think Dalton is a great Bond, but his other film suffers heavily on my list.
mm. It's a bit mid for me. It's a bit meandering.
It was written for Roger Moore, and that doesn't suit what he was trying to do. And while there are some great scenes, there's too many where it's just a bit too awkward.
Have you seen that deleted scene of the flying carpet?
Ugh, exactly.
You can see how uncomfortable Mr. Shakespeare an actor is with just being on a flying carpet and wave. I mean,
And following the possibly the best scene in the film, where he's trying to execute Pushkin,
yeah.
the fact it goes from one to the other, yeah. I would have had a neck brace from the whiplash.
Yeah, it's a consistent tone, right? So that's one thing License to Kill is really good at for me, for my money, which is consistent tone. Like it is
Yes.
what it is.
I love it. And my number 4, which has risen a lot in recent years and is really cementing itself now, Live and Let Die.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
I enjoy the Roger Moore films just as kind of, easy watching, but Live and Let Die, I think, is actually a thoroughly good Bond story.
Okay.
I think it's aided from the fact it follows the books quite closely. Quite closely. And I just love Roger Moore's performance. Obviously, he grows into Bond in a very different way as the films go on. I quite like the slightly more Saint Simon Templar thing we see in the first. And having watched lots of Roger Moore in ITC programs such as The Saint, The Persuaders, I quite enjoyed watching that progression. And I just enjoyed the area. And I must say, moving to America, being a Brit, going to America, has somewhat affected this in some way. But I've not visited New York yet, so I can't claim compete over the top. Well, you can see, obviously, you can't, listeners, because you are listening. But the video chat in which Thomas is talking to me, I have a giant picture of Roger Moore in a boat in the Louisiana swamps behind me, and I bought that specifically because it's a Brit in America, and it's a Brit I massively admire. Admire may be the wrong word.
We enjoy watching him.
We enjoy watching him.
Hmm.
And we try to follow certain aspects of his lifestyle, just not all of them.
Just not all of them. No, no. I find it interesting that lots of people do connect to it location-wise. Lots of Americans seem to like this film, which for me, I'm a kind of a combo breaker on this one. It is probably my lowest rated Roger Moore film, and I think a
Really?
lot
Wow.
to do with it is the place, the themes of the film, and for me the ending I just always found unsatisfying. But I know I place it really low. Except I do like the music. I think there's one bit of orchestral music really in it which I really like, Boat Chase.
I must say, one good friend I have, and I know she won't mind me sharing this story, is Burb James Burb. Now, of course, I've had a lot of collaborations with. She's from Louisiana, and this was the first Bond film she watched, and I think that really cemented her love for Bond. She is a Bond fanatic, and I think the fact that her dad showed her this while she was still in Louisiana just really kicked that off. So, yeah, it's interesting as you say, location can really make a massive difference. And when it comes to the books, Moonraker is my favorite book. I don't know if that's because it's all set in Britain or because it's just a great story. And then Skyfall is my second favorite, and it's possibly the most British Bond film of them all.
Yeah, they do stamp the Union flag on anything they can.
Absolutely.
Even the dog.
Of course.
I know quite a few of us have that Dalton dog, so
Oh, I've got the cufflinks.
Oh, do you?
Yes, I've got these as cufflinks to wear to
Oh,
many events.
fantastic.
When this episode comes out, I'll post about these and can share them with our avid listeners.
Brilliant. It's a multi-sensory experience.
Exactly. Now, should we go to possibly the more controversial part of
Oh,
this
yes.
podcast?
Oh, absolutely.
I feel like people don't mind people's favorites. It's people's least favorites where people get really upset.
Yes. How dare you rate this so low?
And yeah, my bottom five, there's a few in there.
Okay. I'm bracing myself. Let me know.
So my 25th
Okay.
of all of them, and this pipped 24 and 25 are two I don't thoroughly enjoy watching particularly. They're almost equal. So I'm going to say them both at the same time. Quantum of Solace and Moonraker.
Oh, wow. And they're two really different ones. And I'll say now, Quantum of Solace is kind of what got me into the films.
Really? Oh,
absolutely. Yeah. It wasn't the first one I saw in the cinema or anything like that, but I think it was the one that just hit me at the right place, the right time. And I was a Bond fan from that point on, I think.
Yeah.
I
mean, don't get me wrong. If I watch Quantum of Solace, I still end up having, an enjoyable time. I especially enjoy watching it with other people and talking about it. I think the issue is for me with that film in particular, it was just the editing choices and certain stylistic things that happen in that film. My dad has the best quote, and he came up with it completely by himself. I assumed he heard it from like Hitchcock or something. He said, if you ever notice a direction in a film, the director's doing it badly.
Yeah.
And you notice that from the fourth second of that film. Like, if you get past that glorious opening shot and you see the Aston Martin car chase, I don't like watching a film where it's also blurred. It's so boring. And I know Bond has a tendency to follow what's popular at the time, and sometimes it works in its favor. But my two least favorite films are ones that followed the trend, and that's also specifically the reason I dislike Moonraker. Like, even the fact the previous film, Spy Who Loved Me, said next up is For Your Eyes Only, and then sorry, we're gonna do Moonraker because we can throw space laser gun battles in. And the first half of Moonraker isn't a bad film, but the second half I find so appalling. It drops down so massively to me. As much as I love the first half of the film, like the horror scene, technically, we had with the dogs and all that jazz. I don't know what it is. Moonraker just leaves a sour taste in my mouth every time I watch it.
To me, that's like, it's almost like from a different film. It's really odd, that dog scene. It is horrific, but it also doesn't fit the tone of the entirety of the rest of the film.
And then 5 minutes later, you get the Bondola.
Exactly. It doesn't quite work as a palate cleanser. As you say, you're in a neck brace from the.
Yeah. How about you? What are your two least favorites?
I know that my least favorite that I put on this list, I feel I'm maybe being a bit harsh now I'm looking back at my list, but it is Spectre.
Okay. That's my fifth least favorite.
Okay, okay. And for me, it is.
Oh, sorry,
What?
sixth least favorite. Sorry, look, just looking at
Oh,
my list, my sixth least favorite.
yeah. I think the crux of the matter for me is what is the villain trying to do? Like,
Yeah.
what is his evil plan? He's gonna know everything. Okay. He's gonna.
Mhm.
I mean, we have Facebook. I lived in China where it's WeChat. You know, it's just like, okay, so he's gonna know stuff. Um, I don't find these algorithms particularly terrifying. You know, for example, I'm sure Amazon knows a lot of my buying choices, but if I buy a wheelbarrow, then for the next 2 months it's suggesting wheelbarrows, and I'm like, I have a wheelbarrow. You know this. I've just bought one. I am not collecting them. I am not storing them. I'm not stockpiling them. I just bought one. So
I mean, for me,
yeah.
Spectre is 20th on my list overall. It's raised by the fact there are certain scenes from that film I can really enjoy.
Oh yeah,
And if
yeah.
I ever watch this film, I watch it in segments. Like I watch the opening Mexico scene, which I adore. I think that's a great scene. I fully understand the Brofeld annoyance.
Mm.
I can really understand that. But I didn't love the C character and
Yes.
Seven Eyes in the film, but I believe there's actually Nine Eyes in real life.
Yes.
Things like that is, I think the reason it's so low for me is because there was a great opportunity for a really good film there, and also I don't buy Madeline Swan and Bond as
No.
fully united couples, like destined to be. Especially as in the next film, he spends the first half of it going Vesper.
Yeah, exactly. And they're both great actors and actor, actress. They're both fantastic,
Yeah,
but they just don't have any chemistry. It's really odd.
absolutely not. That's the thing, but I still think the best chemistry in a Bond film is either Roger Moore and Lois Maxwell or Roger Moore and Maud Adams in
Yeah,
Octopussy.
yeah,
And that's
absolutely.
like you buy that. With this, you don't get any of it whatsoever.
And to be
And that
honest,
really hinders it, especially knowing what follows Spectre.
mm,
Which to be fair, No Time to Die is ranked higher than Spectre for me.
well,
But
that's
I think
pretty
both those
high up
films.
in my list, actually. I really I like how it's done there. But like I said, I
Mm,
look at Spectre as such a waste. There's so much potential. I mean, there's
yeah,
really good bits with Ray Fiennes.
yeah, yeah. The chunks I enjoy have elevated this film.
Mm.
I think my 23rd and 22nd might go down poorly with the listeners and possibly even yourself here.
Ooh, okay.
Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you again to Chris, who you can find on Instagram at British Bond Addict. Tune in next week to find out about the biggest controversies in our listings.
Finally, we have one on which we really do disagree. Okay.
I must say, getting two Brits to talk about things they might mildly disagree with is never going to work. No, Thunderball.